together. So because the first iteration is focusing only on the supplier information subsystem, the project team will also focus its attention on only the first use cases on the list, because the last three will focus on the product information. So domain classes identify those things in the real world that the system needs to know about and keep track of. So a while ago we're talking about use cases. Now we're jumping into uh, new kind of identification, which is we're going to use the domain classes. So again, domain classes identify those things in the real world that the system needs to know and keep track of. So it is what the system must remember. So such as things as the supplier and contact on product picture. So it is all important for the system. So information systems always have information that is maintained. And this is the method used to determine what is needed. Okay, so this figure here introduce the idea of a model and a class diagram. So you are not expected yet to be able to develop or even understand the elements of the class diagram for this lesson. You should just see that classes are information components that have a name and detailed elements or attributes. So each box is a class and can be thought of as a particular set of objects that are important to the system. So important attributes of each class are also included in each box. So these represent the detailed information about each object that will be maintained by the system. So domain class diagrams such as this one, or simply class diagram, are powerful and frequently used way to understand and document the information requirements of a system. So in our example, the trade show system is very simple with only 4 classes identified. So 2 of which belongs to the supplier information subsystem. So in most real-life systems are much larger and have dozens or even hundreds of domain classes. So let's go to day 3 activities. So the purpose of day 3 activities is to analyze. So we are now in core process 3. So it is in the purpose is to analyze in detail the use cases and domain classes that I presented a while ago that are scheduled to be implemented in the first iteration for the supplier subsystem. So this includes uh, the activities such as um, perform in-depth fact-finding to understand the details of each case. I mean, yes, and understand and document the detailed workflow of each use case and define the user activities with sketches of screens and reports needed for each use case. So as you can see here in our data activities, we're doing two core process now. We're going to do core process 3 and core process 4 since assuming that we have a lot of time and these two core process can be done in one day. So we begin this process with a use case diagram, which is another way to illustrate the use case that have been identified. So as you can remember, we have identified 4 use cases for the supplier information subsystem. And this is the use case diagram for that. So this shows 4 use cases as ovals and the 2 users as stick figures. So the lines connecting users and use cases shows who uses the system for the use case. So for example, the purchasing agent carries out all 4 use cases because he's going to use the system, all these use cases in this of the system. But the manager also looks up suppliers and contact info, only 2 use cases for the manager. So a use case diagram is one tool that is used to document use cases. Another powerful technique to understand the detailed workflow of a particular use case is with a workflow diagram or an activity diagram. So a workflow diagram documents a particular user. So for this example is the purchasing agent and his or her actions and what the system must do to respond to the user's action. So it is used to document the internal workflow of one use case. So here, the arrow that cross the line between the user, our user here is the purchasing agent, and then on the right side of the column is the trade show system. So the arrow here represents the interactions between the user and the system. So these are important because they designate situations where the developers must provide a screen or web page that either captures or displays information. So these situations become part of the user interface later on. So the top arrow indicate that the supplier name is entered into the system first. So thus, we infer that the use case must have an online lookup page with a field available to enter the supplier name. So the next arrow indicates the application requires a page that displays all the details for an individual supplier, including a list of existing contacts. So the user may also want to see more details about the specific contact person for this supplier. So the application must provide detailed information request fields for a particular contact. So because the user will need to select one of the displayed results, we must design the page so each entry on the list is either a link or can be selected. So another technique to define and describe the user actions is a screen layout, as you can see in this figure. So the user works with a computer system through the use of computer screens. So each screen's drawings are useful to describe how the user works with the system. So sample screen layouts are an important technique for developing the user interface. So if the interface is poorly designed, users will not be able to take full advantage of the system. So they may even consider the system to be less optimal. On the other hand, a well-designed user interface, one that is easy to use, has a full range of features to facilitate navigation and provides good information, will enhance the utility of the system tremendously.